You know the feeling. Long day. The kind where nothing went catastrophically wrong, but everything went slightly wrong, and you finally sit down, and there's a cold drink in your hand, and you take that first sip, and the whole day just loosens. Your shoulders drop half an inch. The world goes a little softer around the edges. Nothing's actually changed. You're still you, still in the same room, still owe the same emails. But for a second, everything's fine. Now hold on to that feeling, because at some exact point in the past, there was a first time. A first living thing that swallowed something and felt everything go strange. Felt the edges blur and had no idea why. No word for it. No warning. No friend nearby to say, "Yeah, that's normal. You'll be fine in the morning." Just a body and a strange new fog, and the slow dawning suspicion that something was either very wrong or very, very right. So who was it? Who was the first one to get drunk? When did it happen? And, the part nobody ever asks, did they like it enough to do it again? Here's what makes the question so fun. Almost every other human first you can kind of picture. The first fire, lightning strike, dry grass, somebody paying attention. The first painting, a hand, some ochre, a cave wall. But the first drunk? Nobody set out to invent that. There's no inventor. You can't sit down one afternoon and decide to discover a feeling you've never heard of and cannot describe. It had to sneak up on somebody. Somebody ate something a little past its prime, or drank something that had been sitting out too long, felt profoundly strange, and, this part matters, lived to tell everyone about it. And tell everyone is doing a lot of work there, because they had no framework at all. Picture being the only creature on Earth who's ever been drunk, trying to explain a hangover with a vocabulary of maybe 40 words, none of which are hangover. You'd assume you'd been cursed, or blessed, possibly poisoned by a rival. You would, without question, blame the fruit. The answer to who was first isn't a person at all. The taste for that buzz was riding around inside a body long before anything you'd call human showed up to feel it. And it's still riding around inside yours, tonight, older than you'd ever guess. You've probably got a version of the answer already, and it goes something like this. Around 10,000 years ago, humans figured out farming. They started growing grain. And one day some grain got wet, sat around, caught a little wild yeast, and started to ferment. And some curious, thirsty, slightly reckless Neolithic person leaned over it, smelled the funk, thought, well, somebody has to, and took a sip. Beer, invented by accident. A happy little side effect of agriculture. Alcohol as a bonus feature that came bundled with civilization. And that's a great story. It's the version in most textbooks. It's even partly true. That really is roughly how the first intentional grain beer probably got going. Say it at a dinner party, and you'll sound informed, and nobody's going to correct you. But it's got a hole in it. A big one. If alcohol were truly a 10,000-year-old novelty, some brand new thing our species blundered into after we settled down, then our bodies would have no clue what to do with it. 10,000 years is nothing in evolutionary terms. It is nowhere near enough runway for your genome to build custom machinery for a substance it has never met. You'd expect us to process alcohol about as gracefully as we process, say, plastic. Something modern, something foreign, something the body just grits its teeth and endures. Except that is not what happens. Your body has a dedicated, specialized system that goes to work on alcohol the instant it shows up. A system that's startlingly good at its job, clearly built over an enormous stretch of time, for a substance the body plainly expected to run into a lot. Which raises a genuinely awkward question. If we only met alcohol 10,000 years ago, why does the human body behave like it's been drinking for millions of years? Because it has. And this is where the whole question flips inside out. To work out when we first got drunk, the sharpest move turned out to be not digging in the dirt at all. It was reading a gene. There's a gene that answers to the name ADH4, and its job is to build the very first enzyme that meets alcohol when it enters your system, the one that grabs it and starts tearing it apart before it can do much harm. A biologist named Matthew Kerrigan, working with a team in Florida, pulled off something that sounds like science fiction, and is completely real. They took that gene from a whole spread of living primates, worked backward up the family tree, and reconstructed the ancient versions of it, resurrecting long-dead enzymes from millions of years ago, and testing each one in the lab to see how well it could actually handle alcohol. Most of them couldn't, really. For most of primate history, the enzyme was close to useless against ethanol. Our deep ancestors were lightweights of the very highest order. And then, at one specific moment, a single letter in the genetic code flipped. One tiny change. And the enzyme it produced came out 40 times better at breaking down alcohol. Overnight, in evolutionary time. They dated that flip to around 10 million years ago. 10 million, not 10,000. Long before the first crude stone tools, before anyone in our line walked fully upright, before there was a single creature on the planet you'd look at and call human. The first thing in our family tree to catch a buzz and be built to survive it wasn't a person, or a farmer, or anything you'd call clever. It was an ape. And it wasn't drinking beer. It was eating fruit off the ground. Here's why the ground matters, and it's the heart of the whole thing. Picture that forest floor 10 million years ago. Ripe fruit falls off the tree, lands in the dirt, and sits there. Wild yeast finds it, eats the sugar, and produces alcohol as it goes. So a fallen, overripe piece of fruit is a little boozier than one still hanging in the branches. And it broadcasts that. Alcohol has a smell, and that smell travels on the air. For an animal whose entire life runs on finding fruit, the scent of fermentation is not a warning. It's a dinner bell. It means sugar, calories, ripeness, right over there, come and get it. Robert Dudley, a biologist at Berkeley who has spent about 25 years chasing this one idea, calls it the drunken monkey hypothesis. Our love of alcohol didn't start as a love of alcohol at all. It started as a nose. The ancestors who followed the smell and could stomach the slightly fermented fruit without getting sick simply ate better, and better-fed ancestors have more descendants. That's you. You're descended from the ones who could handle their fruit. And this isn't just a nice theory drawn on a whiteboard. Go and watch what fruit-eating primates do right now. Researchers tracking spider monkeys in Panama found them seeking out and eating fruit fermented to as much as 2% alcohol, and some of the wild fruit on the primate menu clocks in far higher than that. Then there are the chimpanzees. A Berkeley researcher recently spent his days in a Ugandan forest doing the least glamorous job in all of science, collecting chimp urine, specifically to prove they were metabolizing alcohol from their diet. He proved it. The fruit those chimps eat in a normal day delivers them somewhere around the equivalent of 2 standard drinks. 2 beers a day. In the trees. Nobody handed it to them, and nobody's judging them. Your relatives are quietly on a nightly happy hour, and they've been at it far longer than we've been us. Our closest cousins aren't even the extreme case. Deep in the rainforests of Malaysia lives a creature called the pen-tailed tree shrew. A twitchy little thing about the size of a mouse with a feathery tail that looks like it has never made a questionable decision in its life. Its main food is the nectar of the Burton palm, and here's the twist, that palm's flower buds work as tiny natural breweries. Wild yeast colonizes them and ferments the nectar right there on the plant, up to almost 4% alcohol. Roughly the strength of a beer, and one of the booziest natural foods anyone has ever measured. Frank Wiens, a researcher out of the University of Bayreuth in Germany, put the palms under round-the-clock video and clocked these tree shrews drinking from them for more than 2 hours a night, every night, all year long. Run the math against their body size, and they're putting away something like the human equivalent of 9 glasses of wine in an evening. And they are never drunk, not once, stone sober every time, for what may be tens of millions of years. Some animals didn't just stumble onto alcohol, they built their whole life around the tap. Now sit with the strangeness of it for a second, because there's a real paradox buried here. Alcohol is a poison. Your liver treats it as a threat. It drops what it's doing and works to clear it out. So why on earth would evolution wire an animal to want a toxin? The answer is dose, and it's timing. In a piece of fermented fruit, the alcohol is faint, and it's welded to the one thing the body was desperate for: calories. So the brain did the lazy, sensible thing. It bookmarked the feeling, It linked that faint alcohol signal straight to the reward system. A little tag that reads, "Food is here. This is good. Go get more." The pleasant fuzz was never the goal. It was a receipt for finding a great meal. Which is fine, and even brilliant, right up until you take a "foods this way" signal that's 10 million years old and point it at something we later learned to make 40% pure. The warm glow you feel tonight is an ancient calorie detector going off in a world where we got very, very good at concentrating the exact thing it was built to sniff out. Some deep part of your brain thinks you just found an outstanding tree. So did they like it? That's almost the wrong question, because evolution does not keep handing down a craving its owners hated. If the buzz had been nothing but misery, the animals chasing it would have quit, and the taste would have quietly died out of the family tree. It didn't. It got stronger, and it got passed along, all the way down to you. Which is about as close to a yes as biology ever gives. They kept coming back. For 10 million years, give or take, nobody in your entire line has ever really stopped. For almost all of that stretch, though, getting a buzz meant waiting. You took whatever nature left rotting on the ground. Then, at some point, we stopped waiting for the fruit to go off on its own and started making it happen on purpose. And we can pin down roughly when, because Patrick McGovern, the University of Pennsylvania archaeologist who basically invented the whole field of digging up ancient drinks, found the receipt for it. Scraped from inside pottery jars at a place called Jiahu in China was the chemical fingerprint of a deliberate brew from about 9,000 years ago. A mix of rice, honey, hawthorn fruit, and grape, fermented to something like a modern beer's strength. That's the oldest recipe we've ever chemically confirmed. And it's worth picturing what actually sat in that cup, because it was nothing like the crisp, cold, precise stuff you'd order today. These early brews were cloudy, thick, a little sour, closer to a boozy porridge than a pint. Gentle, too. You'd have to commit to a real quantity of the stuff to get anywhere near drunk, which is its own quiet clue that oblivion was never really the goal. And notice what the recipe is. Humanity's first known drink wasn't some careful single malt purist affair. It was a kitchen sink everything drink. Grab the sweet stuff, grab the fruit, throw it all in, let it ride. 9,000 years ago, 3,000 years before anyone stacked the first stone of the first pyramid, before writing existed anywhere on the planet, people were already tinkering with the formula, already trying to make the buzz a little better than the last batch. That's the entire craft beer aisle, 9 millennia early. You could still squint at all of that and rescue the old story. Maybe brewing came right on the heels of farming. You grow the grain, you get a surplus, one thing leads to another. Here's the stop that breaks that for good. Li Liu, an archaeologist at Stanford, went into a cave called Rakefet near Haifa, in what's now Israel, and analyzed the residue caked inside 13,000-year-old stone mortars. What she found was malted, brewed grain, beer, made by the Natufians, people who were still hunter-gatherers, who had not invented farming yet. 13,000 years ago, earlier than the plow, earlier than the wheel, earlier than nearly every first you were taught to file under the dawn of civilization. And they weren't brewing it to get quietly wrecked in a corner. Rakefet was a burial place, and the beer was tied to ritual feasts, gatherings to honor the dead. And think about what brewing actually asks of you. It's not a whim. You have to collect the grain, malt it, time it, tend it. Real, deliberate work, started days ahead, for a payoff that only makes sense if a crowd is going to show up. Nobody goes to that much trouble to drink alone. You brew because you're throwing a feast, and a feast pulls people in, puts everyone a little in each other's debt, and quietly cements the bonds that hold a group together, which turns the original story completely on its head. Alcohol wasn't a byproduct of farming that showed up once we had grain to spare. It came first. And that revives an idea archaeologists have kicked around for more than 60 years, sometimes called the beer hypothesis, that the desire to brew, and to gather people around the drink, might be part of what talked our ancestors into settling down and planting grain in the first place. Beer not as a reward for civilization, beer as a reason we bothered building it. I'll be straight with you that this part isn't fully settled. There's 14,400-year-old bread from a site in Jordan, older than the Rakefet beer. So the specific fight over whether beer beat bread to the finish line is still very much a live argument. But the bigger point stands on solid ground. We were deliberately brewing before we were farming, and we were doing it to bring people together. The oldest brewers we can actually find weren't drinking to escape. They were drinking on purpose, with each other, for something that mattered. So think about the last time you got a drink with somebody. Not alone, with somebody. The text that said, "Let's grab a beer this week." The clink of 2 glasses before anyone's taken a sip, which accomplishes nothing, changes nothing, and everybody does anyway. The round bought for the table. The way "let's get a drink" is almost never really about the drink. That whole ritual, the gathering, the shared cup, the small ceremony of it, is the oldest part of this entire story, and the part that never went anywhere. The Natufians hauled water and grain and malt into a cave 13,000 years ago, and brewed beer not to numb out alone, but to pull people together and mark a moment that meant something. Long before them, an ape followed its nose across a forest floor because the smell of fermenting fruit meant the group was about to eat well. The buzz was never truly the point. The buzz was the thing that got everyone into the same place. You are running that exact program tonight. When you raise a glass with a friend, you're pulling on a thread that runs straight back, past every bar and every toast and every dinner party, past the first villages, past farming, past language itself, past your whole species, to a creature on a forest floor 10 million years ago that took a chance on a piece of overripe fruit and felt, for the very first time, the world go soft. The taste didn't come from a bartender, or a monk, or a Neolithic accident with wet grain. It came with you, older than the word for it, older than the species that finally got around to naming it. You were built to want this, and more than that, you were built to want it in company. So here's what I keep circling back to. Someone was first. One specific individual, ape or human, we genuinely can't say, at one specific moment, felt this before any other creature on Earth ever had. No word for it, no one to ask, no way to know whether it would wear off or whether it was the end. We will never learn their name. We can't even be certain of their species, but it happened to someone, and every last thing since, every vineyard, every toast, every terrible decision at a wedding, grew out of that one confused, tilting moment. So I'll leave you with the thing I honestly can't stop turning over. That first time, before anyone alive had the faintest idea what alcohol even was, do you think they figured they were dying? Or that they'd stumbled onto something holy? What would you have thought was happening to you